ES Audio.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Dallaglio. Welcome to my rugby podcast. This week, we've got a very special episode for you as we look ahead to the Premiership Final on Saturday. The battle is, of course, going to be between two giants of the English game, Leicester Tigers and Saracens. So I'm delighted to be joined by a former Sarries legend who had a very illustrious career, winning 5 Premiership titles with the club. He also, of course, represented England and the British and Irish Lions. It's Brad Barritt. Brad, a very good afternoon or good morning to you. It's great to have you on. How are you, by the way?
Thank you very much for having me, Lawrence. Yeah, I think suddenly you blink and it's finals time. So it's probably the last 3 weeks where I've really got back into watching and following it pretty closely. And I think we had 2 fantastic semi-finals last week. So it's going to be an amazing week ahead.
Well, listen, we look at finals time and it's a very familiar face in Saracens. And talking about familiar faces, I'm delighted to be finally on the same episode as the Queen of Sports Rugby Broadcasting. It is, of course, Sarra Elgan. Sarra, thank you for hosting the show today. You're a far more accomplished, far more beautiful and far better presenter than I am. So now I know that you're down at Twickenham and you're going to be taking a behind-the-scenes trip and keeping people up to date with what happens in the build-up to a Prem final. But I guess you've got a few questions for us both, have you?
Yeah, preparations are kind of underway here already, actually. We've just come out now, we're just in the Marriott Hotel next door. We all needed a coffee. But you guys both have obviously played Twickenham many times. So yeah, I thought we'd have a little chat before I took everyone around. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, pleasure.
Okay, we'll start with you then, Laura, because your visit to Twickenham, like on the pitch, came long before you actually pulled that jersey on. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm born and bred in London. So I live in Richmond, which is quite close to Twickenham. Everyone thinks that I live in Richmond because it means that it's not very far for me to go to the stadium. But what they don't realise is that you have to actually qualify to get there first. So it would be a bit ambitious of me just to move to Richmond because I thought that I'd be nice to be near the National Stadium. I actually played on the width of Twickenham pitch a long time ago for the under-8s or under-9s of my school that lived locally. And I did manage to score a try on the width of the pitch, but Twickenham Stadium has changed over the years. It's obviously, as an Englishman, and it's our national stadium, so it is iconic. It's got a lot of history there. And, you know, it's just one of those stadiums where I think when I first turned up, there was maybe 40,000 was the attendance, maybe 44,000, and it's obviously grown and grown into what it is today. So yeah, very special place for me, not just as when I was playing rugby, but also growing up as well.
I would have loved to see you as an 8-year-old. What was an 8-year-old Lawrence Dallaglio like?
Oh, I don't know, a lot smaller, put it that way, a lot smaller.
With more hair.
I played, you start life on the wing.
What?
Actually? Yeah, absolutely. Played on the wing, and then you realise that no one in England throws you the ball on the wing, and it gets really cold, and therefore I sort of started moving my way gradually further and further towards the action. And then when you start playing up front, you realise actually it's a lot more fun because you get the ball first, basically, and then you decide who gets it after that.
And then you pass it out to the pretty boys in the back like Brad. So Brad, can you remember the first time you were ever at Twickenham? I'm sure you can. Did it have that sense of history, that sense of occasion for you?
Well, funny enough, I actually attended an England international in 1990. So I think I would have been 4 or 5 years old at the time. Obviously, grandparents were English, and my mom's brother and her family all lived in London at the time. So I don't remember much, but I do remember a photo of being in Twickenham. And again, as Lawrence addressed, before the big redevelopment of it. I think anyone who is a keen rugby follower, a lover, has a huge appreciation and love of Twickenham. It's not called HQ for no reason. It's the home of rugby, where it started. Even as a kid growing up in South Africa, it would have always been on your bucket list of stadiums to play at.
Okay, that's interesting. Because Lawrence, you recall how the stadium became known, I guess, as Fortress Twickenham, because it was that period, wasn't there, between 99 and 2004? Was it kind of a 19 match winning run, I think, for England during that period. What were those years like? Did you feel, I don't know, almost invincible as a team?
Well, they were a lot of fun, but I mean, you've got to get. I mean, any team that you play for, whether club or province or international team, you want to try and create that atmosphere, particularly at home, where you're kind of winning games and unbeatable. But there's good sides that come through the door, and you want to try and make it as uncomfortable as possible for those teams. And the English were always very good at doing exactly the opposite, making life really nice and making sure that they were really. That they really enjoyed their experience, which obviously after the game, no problem at all. But
most of the Welsh remember it like that, though. I'm not sure we remember it like that, Lawrence.
No, probably not.
Okay.
But no, we had a spell there for a long time where results went our way, where we started to build some real dominance, and I guess it becomes quite an intimidating place for people to play. But I've got, as I said, some very early memories of Twickenham, not just as a player. I went to watch the World Cup final there in 1991. We watched England lose. I watched England win a Grand Slam. And I remember being in the crowd, I think, when Philippe Saint-André scored that wonder try. And then England went on to win the Grand Slam that day. And I played for the England under-19s the day before. And it sort of, something happened that day that made me think, do you know what, one day I'd love to be able to run out there myself and do something like that. Fortunately enough, was able to do that with both club and country.
One thing I've always wondered, actually, Brad, and I'll ask you this: how different is it playing in a venue like Twickenham, in a final, compared to that of when you run out there for your country? Is it a very different feeling, or is it quite similar?
I think it is different. Again, you play in a big England Test match in the Six Nations or in the autumn. Let's get a whole sense of the whole crowd coming together. I think you've got 90% of the crowd behind you. The emotions are high, where I guess in a Premiership final, there's often people who actually expected the team to make it that have joined the crowd. It's probably a 50-50 split. It doesn't quite feel like a home game. So, my experience is the great days at Twickenham with the internationals are phenomenal. One of my fondest memories would have been for England in 2012 against the All Blacks, and the feeling and the emotion and the electricity in the air that day was something I'll never forget. But I think obviously on a Sarries hat, again, it's a few factors that you really have to get right. Again, I said to Lawrence in the pre-chat, often you come to Premiership final time, it's in the summer, it's in June, it's a lot hotter than you've ever experienced. You're in the cauldron atmosphere, and I think it's a team that can manage their emotions the best that really come out tops. Because often you go into a game like this expecting something, and often it unfolds in a different way. And I think it's the teams that can be adaptable and be able to mold their style of play to what's needed on the day that ultimately prevail.
That's really interesting.
I know you haven't asked it, but probably that's, for me, where I see Sarries edging it this weekend. You look at the spine of that team of Good, Farrell, Billy, Jamie George, Mako. You're talking about 5 guys who've been in this environment 10, 12, 14 times in big games. Leicester have had a phenomenal season. Huge respect to Steve Borthwick. And again, another teammate, Richard Wigglesworth, who've done an amazing job. Again, they're not going to come over and roll over. But for me, sometimes these big games, that big match experience does prove to be quite powerful.
We're definitely going to be speaking more about that now. But I find that really interesting that it's almost like a different mindset, is it? Playing at Twickenham for England than that of what it is for your club, Lawrence?
Yeah, but it is very much so. I mean, the thing about the way that the Premiership final, I mean, I love the one-off occasion like that. I think it's special. Obviously, it never used to be like that. It was always the team that finished at the top at the end of however many rounds you had. But just having that one-off occasion does make it very different, because as Brad alluded to there, the rugby that you play all season is just part of getting you to the final, and then you've still got to win the big one-off occasion, and the weather can be a huge factor, all the experience, the preparation. The most important thing, and I know I say this a lot, but there's only ever 2 emotions in rugby and in sport, and it's you either win or you lose. You're either happy or you're not, and experiencing the not very happy is just not. I mean, yes, it's part of what we have to grow as players and people and learn how to lose. but it's not really the preferred option. So it is about timing your run to perfection. It's about trying to work out as coaches and players, how do you get the best out of yourself and everyone around you? What you're looking for on that day is the very best performance of the season so far. And it's about, and the emotions in the build up to a Prem final are there. There's guys are on edge all week in training. There's a real excitement and nervousness, but your job is just to calm everyone down and say, look, we're not going to win the trophy on Tuesday or Wednesday. It's about what happens on Saturday. And it's being able to release all of those emotions collectively at the same time against a very worthy opponent. So you're always playing the best team in the final. And it's just about timing it. And not just as players, as coaches as well. They've got to get their preparations right, because if they overhype you too early in the week, you've got to just time it so it all comes together at whatever it is, 3 o'clock, 4:30 on Saturday.
We obviously, as you mentioned, Doris, we're going to be walking around Twickenham a little later, and we're going to be going into the changing room. So, Brad, give us an idea of what being in those changing rooms are like in that stadium pre-match.
Nervous energy. I think, again, Lawrence has addressed it. Your whole sort of match day preparation is slightly different. I think with the travel and the expected chaos around the stadium, you usually get there a little bit earlier. I mean, in my experience with Saracens, we did that. We had our pre-match meal at the stadium. So everything is slightly different to what the norm is. Even with away games, you have a pretty set formula of when you arrive, where you have your meal, how early you arrive at the stadium. Where the Prem final is a little bit different, you're spending it a bit longer there. And I think all those feelings that Lawrence addressed in terms of keeping the emotion down for the right moment, because it can really, really dampen and take so much energy away from you when you're constantly thinking about it. So being able to put aside kickoff until it arrives, but keeping that relaxed type of engaged communication between the team, I think, is pivotal to making sure that you're in the right place for kickoff.
What were you like in the dressing rooms, Lawrence, pre-match? A lot of chest pumping going on?
Well, listen, I mean, obviously, there's things that are said in the dressing room that you wouldn't say in any other walk of life, really.
Like what?
You wouldn't get away with it, really. But the thing about playing for your club, and it is different to your country, yes, you get to know the guys at international level, but the club journey, these are people that you spend every day of every week, of every month, with. So there's a deep-rooted understanding of them as rugby players, but also as human beings, as people. So I think it's a very special connection with that group. And the more time that you spend together, the more that connection grows stronger and stronger. And you create memories, and you create, hopefully very positive memories about what happens. But it's very transparent in that changing room. It's about, for me, it's always been about connecting the head and the heart. Once you're in the changing room with 10 minutes to go, Brad or I, we're not going to teach people how to be technically any better than they already are. And most of them are pretty gifted anyway. It's about finding something that you can hook around the head and the heart that makes them go out and elevates their performance. I mean, Owen Farrell and George Ford are going to give you 9 or 10 out of 10 anyway. You don't have to worry about those guys. But really, it's about lifting everyone to the same level and trying to deliver all their best performances all at the same time. And yeah, listen, most of the time I was the underdog in the changing room. We weren't expecting necessarily to win the game. And that's a pretty good place to be, I think, because you've got a point to prove and you go out there and you deliver. And I've always been a big believer in starting games well. Most of the time, and it's not always the case, but the team that's generally winning at halftime wins the game. So, you can't sit back and wait for the opposition to impose their game on you. You've got to go out there and come out the blocks fast and never stop, basically, until you're walking up the steps to pick up the trophy. And that's the way it goes. It's a very special place, those changing rooms. And I'm lucky enough to have played in, I don't know, a lot of big games there. I did lose, ironically, one to Saracens, but they had a very good side in those days, as they do now. They're, Liner, Sella, Francois Pinard. So I didn't mind losing one final. I think it's important to taste defeat every now and again, because it makes you cherish the wins as well.
100%. And you've both obviously played in numerous finals. And here's a question for you, Brad. Which of those Premiership finals sticks out in the memory more so than any other?
Well, I think to Lawrence's point there, one of the sad realities are, or the losses stick with you a lot longer than the wins. It's that really sort of bitter pill to swallow. It's a hero or zero scenario where, one team it's absolute jubilation, the other it's despair. And having gone through
that's quite hard to watch as well, I think. That's quite hard to watch, I think, as fans. It's difficult.
And, in many ways, I put a lot of Saracens' success in latter years down to some of those early learnings. I think in our first season in 2010, I think the season before Saracen had finished 9th maybe in the Prem. It was part of that revolution where Brendan Fenter took over. We got to the final. I think we're leading up until maybe 78, 79 minutes. Kickoff happens. Scott Hamilton takes it off and they end up scoring. And, you get the sense of there was so much expectation, and being a young guy at the time, I think it does haunt you for some time. And then similarly in 2013, Saracens went back to back, losing against Toulon at the Millennium Stadium in the Champions Cup final. The following week, which was how it was done back then, you had to play a Premier final, and we lost in extra time to Northampton. And I felt those were two huge galvanizing moments for the club, because again, it made you appreciate the journey as much as the destination. And I think that's always been a mantra that Saracens has lived by. If we're going to judge ourselves only by what happens in the final day of the final season, we won't really get the best out of people day to day. So I think from that point on, we started to appreciate that it's the little things that you do every day and the things that you're able to impart on your teammates beside of you that will ultimately get you back to those positions and hopefully find a way of winning. So for me, again, you spoke about the ones I enjoyed most. It was probably that one in 2011. Again, we were a team without any internationals. Steve Borthwick was the only active international in that team at the time. He led the team phenomenally well, and we were able to, repeat what we had done the last year and get into the final again. And then similarly, which probably comes as a weird surprise, I'm trying to remember, I think it might be 2017, but the reason it stands out so much is because Saracens had a pretty poor season. I think for our standards at that time, we lost in the Champions Cup quarterfinal against Leinster away. And in many ways, it had been a bit of a humbling. It had been a comprehensive loss. I think to that point, there was a run of games in the Premiership where we may have lost 7 or 8 on the trot. And for a long part, it felt like a really deep, dark hole. But I think that Leinster game is where we were able to find ourselves and find a way of going back to basics and what really makes this team tick. And I think we went a consecutive sort of 8 or 9 victories on the trot to get a home semi-final, eventually win. So it's often in these trying times that you find the most satisfaction when you're able to claw yourself out.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Lawrence. It's almost like the run-up to the final is what makes winning the final more special. Might be fair in saying that?
Yeah, well, you have to time it correctly. I mean, sport has always been about great rivalries, whatever it might be. In any sport, and I think at the time that I was lucky enough to play in Prem finals, that Leicester and Wasps had this incredible rivalry. Leicester obviously back there again, Wasps aren't, but I can remember the last season I played in. I retired from international rugby after the World Cup, having been beaten by South Africa in the final. I got back to the club and we were bottom of the Premiership table. It's hard to believe, really. And then we went on a run of 13 matches unbeaten that took us all the way to Twickenham, and we played against, you guessed it, Leicester in the final, and we were able to win. So I think it's that journey, that last part of the season that takes you kind of, you just get on this winning run and it becomes very infectious. But like Brad, I've got lots of very positive memories that we created, and that's kind of what the messages you reinforce. You don't want people to go away for the rest of their life wondering and regretting about not winning this game or that game. It's inevitably going to happen, but when you get to Twickenham, you want people to create those special memories. And I suppose 2005 was probably the one that Wasps fans would look back on and say that they were most proud of that. I think it was Martin Johnson's last game, Neil Back's last game, John Wells's last game. And we were, unfortunately, the people that spoiled the party, really. But we did it so emphatically. When you prepare as a group of players and coaches And it's not often that this happens, where the game plan, everything that you prepared for, comes off, to the in every detail. And that's quite satisfying, because it very rarely happens in a game of rugby where things go to plan. But on that particular day, it did. It was a very special feeling. And we were only used to playing in front of about 10,000 people at High Wycombe, and then suddenly you come to Twickenham and there'd be 60,000 Wasps fans, and you go, well, where have they all come from?
So let's look ahead then to the final. Brad, I mean, you obviously have an insight into that Saracens setup. So give us an idea how they will be preparing. Jamie George said a brilliant line before the semi-final. He said that there was like a Michael Jordan-like focus. I think he was predominantly talking about Owen Farrell, but I'd imagine that's probably true of the whole team, right?
Yeah, I think you went into that semi-final getting a sense that emotionally the players were in the right position. I think a lot of those players would have had to read and listen and absorb, all the sideshow that was going on around, the input of other players from other teams. And I think they probably managed that emotional challenge better than Quins on the day. Despite obviously going in down early, you got a sense that the confidence was still pretty high. And I think being up at halftime was obviously a pivotal moment. Again, you just saw the likes of the sort of big game players, guys who've been there and done that, cool, calm, collected. Even when something didn't go well, Quins had a fantastic try when Marcus Smith makes a break, Danny Kerr goes over, and there was no panic. And that's probably the biggest part of going into these big games, is that you're trying to reduce anxiety levels. You're trying to release players from their own inhibitions and allowing them to be the best versions of themselves. And you got a sense as that game went on, the Saracens team just grew in confidence and were able to put their best foot forward. And I think that experience will really bode them well for Twickenham on Saturday.
Who's your money on, Lawrence Dallaglio?
I mean, I agree with Brad there. They've got so many test match animals in that Saracens team. They're players that have been there, done it at club level, at international level, at every level, quite frankly. So there is an enormous task ahead for Steve Borthwick and Richard Wigglesworth and Kevin Sinfield to convince their players. Because if you look at the sides, there's not much difference between the two sides. They were, I think, Leicester won with by 3 points or whatever it was up at Welford Road, and Saracens won at the Stonex. So there's not a huge amount between the sides, but there is in terms of experience of playing in Premiership finals and big games. So somehow the coaching group have got to bridge that lack of experience that Leicester have, because they're at the start of the journey. And the most important thing about winning is believing you can win. And I know that that's before a ball's even been kicked. If Leicester go there with belief that they can genuinely win, then they've got a chance. But my money is definitely on Saracens, because if Brad and I were playing for Saracens on Saturday with all of those players around you, you'd be devastated if you didn't come out on top, because in many ways the pressure is more on them than it is on Leicester. So they have to win. And I just think with Owen Farrell, with Itoje, with Jamie George particularly, and let alone some of the other players they've got, there's so much experience, whether they go points up, points down, they know how to get over the line and win games. So as good as Leicester have been this season, I'm afraid I'm going to have to go for Saracens. And the question I wanted to ask Brad was, of all the trophies that Saracens have won, let's not get into the controversy around the salary cap, but there is a sense that this particular trophy has been won in a slightly different way, because they've come back up from the Championship. They've had to really work hard. They maybe haven't got quite the same squad that they had in days gone by. And I think, if anything, this will give them as much satisfaction as anything they've won in the past.
Yeah, again, it's that emotion and having to channel those feelings for 2 years to give yourself that opportunity. I think it will compare with the 2011 victory, when the team had never been there before. To get over the line, they've had to face a similar challenge, being in the doldrums of the Championship last year. You got a sense that there was always this focus on the year we come back, we want to be as strong as ever. So, and a huge emotional and a mental challenge. But I think the squad and the coaching group and the greater support staff have done a great job in terms of getting those guys back on task, getting them to put their best foot forward and let their rugby do the talking. And ultimately, I think that's what they've done, and they've got a great opportunity to cap it off on Saturday.
Okay, so we'll see who's celebrating on Saturday, obviously. But once the trophy's been lifted, once that's been won, and then you had the adulation from the fans, when you walk back down the tunnel into the changing room, what are the celebrations like there? We'll start with Lawrence.
Well, listen, there's obviously an enormous amount of excitement and all the emotions you'd expect from winning, but a sense of relief, really, that you've ended up getting the result that you wanted, because the opposite emotion is unthinkable and unbearable, quite frankly. So yeah, listen, there's a lot of happiness, smiles, everything, and those are the moments that you probably remember more than any, because when you shut the door, everyone inside that changing room is a very important part of the club and of what you've created. So those are really the happiest times, really, and they're the ones that certainly I will cherish and remember. And that's when you're normally very good at winning, but you're even better at celebrating. So it's
you're very good at celebrating.
Well,
you must have some stories though.
You can always catch up on a good night's sleep, Sarra, but never a good night out. You know that. That
is definitely a mantra, Lawrence Dallaglio, for sure. Come on, there must be stories. You always got a story about everything.
Well, the difficulty with club rugby is that, and Brad had the same, is that inevitably, you get one night to celebrate, so you've got to do it properly, because then a lot of those guys will be boarding a plane and going off to Australia or whatever country or on tour, and the game is relentless. It doesn't give you time to stop, to think, and I guess in fairness, there's always a couple of days, and most clubs, you never plan to win, because that's disrespectful. You never put any preparations in. But if you do win, you might turn out to have a pretty good Sunday afternoon somewhere in a pub in North London if it's Saracens, or West London if it was Was, and you get the whole squad, the whole group together, not just the guys at Twickenham, and you'd celebrate in style. And then somehow those who played international rugby have to clamber on an aeroplane and fly the other side of the world and do it all again.
With a hangover. Now, I've been on many a night out with Lawrence. I've not been on any nights out with you, Brad, but I'm sure that Saracens team, they knew how to celebrate as well. What stories have you got?
Yeah, I think it shows the growing maturity with age. I contrast my first one when I think it was with 2011. I think it ended up being with Matt Stevens, Chris Wiles, in the West End, fire extinguishers going off, and then 10 years later, it's kind of, you can't wait to see your kids and your family on the pitch and be able to share that moment with them. So again, it comes with wherever you are at your point in time, but I agree with Lawrence's sentiment. For me, the best was always the day after, because often after the games, there's that sense of relief, there's that emotional fatigue, you feel drained, but it's the day after where you get together. You're either at a pub, and in the most recent history, Sarries always went down to Wolfpack in West Hampstead, Ali Hargreaves, Chris Wiles' business, and just a great opportunity to connect and share the moment. But ultimately, the jubilation only lasts a few days, and it's a funny feeling. It's that some people have to move on and go to England international duty, the others go on a summer break. And I think it's only in the latter years that you learn to appreciate that you need to enjoy every moment of getting there, because even when you get over the line, it's going to start again the next season. So making the most of those moments are truly special.
It's going to be good, isn't it? So you both there. I know you're in Cape Town at the moment. Brad, you're coming over. Are you popping on a plane, coming over to see us?
I am, yeah. I'm flying over on Thursday night, so I can't wait. It'll be the first time being back at Twickenham for quite some time. So really looking forward to it.
Obviously, Lawrence, you'll be there.
I'll be taking a gentle walk down to Twickenham, and looking forward to seeing it. So thank you, Sarra, for today. It's been a real honour to chat with Brad and with you, and we'll leave the rest of the podcast in your very capable hands.
Lawrence Dallaglio's Rugby Podcast, supported by Fuller's London Pride, the official beer of Premiership Rugby.
So we've come outside. I was going to say to the sunshine, but the sun has suddenly decided to go in. But we're outside anyway, getting some fresh air, which is good, in front of the famous statue. Of course, I'm joined by Mark Lynch now, Director of Venue here at Twickenham. And Mark, I'd imagine this week leading up to the final is pretty busy for you.
It's a pretty busy week, but it's an amazing week. We've got two huge matches. Gallagher Premiership Final on Saturday, England Barbarians on Sunday. So two amazing matches. So yeah, really, really busy week, but excited.
Give us an idea of how much preparation goes into hosting 82,000 people in that stadium behind us.
So taking Premiership Final as a perfect example, we start planning pretty much as soon as the final whistle goes into next year. So automatically we're into sales, into marketing, into the ticketing side of things, and then the operational delivery starts about 6 months out. We've got an amazing team here that pull all of that together. So whether that's from the stewarding side to our catering teams, to the operations teams, to the volunteers, and they all get together to pull that together. It's a huge amount of work. And for Saturday, we'll be here at 5:30 in the morning, ready to kick off the day before everybody gets here on site, and we'll be here till about 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, because that was going to be my next question. We just walk up here casually at 1 o'clock and head to the bar, head to our seat, and you guys have been here since 5:30.
5:30 in the morning, ready to get all the staff in. So a really, really long day, but a brilliant one.
To those who haven't been to Twickenham before, how would you sell it?
How would I sell it? This place has been here since 1909, so it's got a huge amount of history, a huge amount of heritage. It's had some of rugby's greatest moments, and Saturday's going to be no different. You've got Leicester versus Saracens. It's going to be an amazing game, and it's going to set some of those new bits of history for the future. But also, it goes beyond the rugby. We pride ourselves on the fan experience. So we open the doors at 11:30 for fans coming in, right the way through to 7 o'clock, and there's entertainment all day. So taking on Saturday, we've got Sophie Ellis-Bextor.
I can't wait to see her, by the way.
I know, she's going to be amazing.
I'm so excited to see her at halftime.
And the feeling as well,
Yes.
and there's kids' activities, there's the fan village, so it's a whole day of activity, really.
Any surprising facts that you can throw at us and figures?
Facts and figures. For a big international, we'll do 58,000 plates of food in one day.
58,000
plates of food. On top of that, about 18,000 concession meals will be served. And there's about 3,000 staff that look after that catering operation.
And they obviously work very, very hard.
And work hard. And then in addition to that, actually for this Saturday, we've got a new sustainable product coming in. So we've got a drinks cup that will self-destruct. So it breaks down, it gets turned into wax, so it goes back into the natural cycle of the earth, has absolutely no toxins, no microplastics, nothing, but it breaks down into that wax. So really, really good product as well.
When you said self-destruct then, I had
not
visions.
Exploding, not exploding.
I had visions of cups all over Twickenham.
No, just completely breaking down into nothing. So a really great sustainable product.
Okay. Who are you backing at the weekend, Mark? Are you allowed to say?
I can't say who I'd be backing, but it'll be an amazing day. Whoever wins deserves to win it, and it'll be fantastic. Two huge teams.
Absolutely. So Mark, thanks so much for your time. I know you're a busy man this week. We're going to leave you go do your thing now. We're going to head into the Rugby Museum. Is that a good place to show everyone around?
It's amazing. You'll love it. All the history's in there, and I'm sure the team will look after you.
Okay, so I've come now to the World Rugby Museum, and I found somebody that knows all about what we see around us here. He's a curator here, he's Phil McGowan. Phil, how long has the museum been here at Twickenham?
So the RFU's had a museum since the early 1980s. It's had a professional museum over in the East Stand since 1996.
That's the one I've been to.
Yeah, that was a good museum,
Yeah.
but this is the most recent incarnation. This has been here since 2018, and we're in the South Stand now.
Right, so how many visitors would you have here throughout the year, would you say?
We get around sort of 25 to 35,000 people a year. Obviously a few less during the pandemic, but we're bouncing back now, so that's really good.
Okay, so what's the main attraction here? What would be the main artefact everyone wants to see?
Our most famous object is the Calcutta Cup, which is the oldest international football trophy of any of the codes in the world. So everybody knows about that and the story behind it, how it was made from melted down silver rupees, given to the RFU and awarded to the winners of the England-Scotland match every year. But on top of that, we've also got the oldest international football jersey of any of the codes in the world. So rugby had its first international match in 1871. That was a year before the first soccer international, and only one jersey survived from that match, and we've got it on display.
How do you go about getting these artefacts? How do you reach out to people or find them? Yeah. How does that work?
So a few different ways. I mean, we've been collecting since 1871, so the RFU collection is here. That includes the original minutes from the first meeting and the agreement that was signed at that time. But then we get lots of donations from the families of players. We acquire things as well on the market occasionally. And it's just grown and grown. Okay,
so Calcutta Cup is what draws people here. What's your favourite part of the museum or item?
I haven't got a favourite. There's lots of lovely items and I like them all. But we've got the oldest Lions jersey in the world from 1888, which is a stripy jersey rather than an all-red jersey. We've got the all-red jerseys as well, which they were from the 1950s. We've got a 1974 tracksuit top that belonged to Phil Bennett, who very sadly passed away recently. one of the great players of that tour, one of the great players of his era, probably the finest fly half in the world when he was playing. And it's a lovely tribute to him to have that on display.
I'm not sure many would disagree with you there, Phil. And obviously, all our love and thoughts go to Phil and his family. It must be a really difficult time. And you've got an exhibition here at the moment. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have a different exhibition every year. The one that's currently on display is called In Her Own Words, and it's about the history of the Women's Rugby World Cup, told through the words of the players and the administrators. It's a great story. This was something that a bunch of women got together and organised against contemporary wisdom. They went against the grain, they made something happen despite resistance, and they built this legacy which the Women's Rugby World Cup has today.
Fantastic. Right, and obviously the big games at the weekend, the big Premiership Final between Tigers and Sarries.
Yeah.
What can I find in this museum to do with those clubs or that's special to those clubs? Tell me.
So there was a very famous player called Prince Alexander Obolensky who played for Leicester Tigers in the 1930s. He was a prince, he was a Russian prince, but he escaped Russia as a baby during the revolution, went to Oxford University, played rugby, was selected for England in 1936. There was a bit of a controversy. As a Russian, he wasn't strictly eligible to play for England, but he played anyway, and he made his debut against New Zealand and scored 2 tries. England beat New Zealand for the first time in their history, and that was the end of the debate about his nationality. And we have the passport that he was given later that year on display, as well as his England cap, his cigarette case, because he was a bit of a champagne Charlie, apparently.
Well, he'd have to be, wouldn't he, being a prince?
And his England rose as well. And then just behind, opposite that, we've got a jersey that Owen Farrell wore in 2018 when England played New Zealand, which was a match to commemorate the end of the First World War. Obviously, he was the captain of England then and the captain of Saracens now.
Phil, thanks for your time. I promise you guys, if you do come to the stadium, you have to come to the World Rugby Museum. It's incredible. You really enjoy it. Right, I'm going to head into the stadium now. Is it very far from here?
It's just around the corner.
Amazing. Okay, so we've made it into the changing room. This is actually the home dressing room, is where the Tigers will be at the weekend because they finished off the season as top seeds. And there's a wall here, and listed on this wall is every single player that's put on that England jersey from 1870 all the way through to the present day, which is a really nice touch. And I don't know, it gives it a sense of history, I guess, doesn't it, to the players that come in here to change. And this is where they all change. And on the walls here, you've got a list again of players who have sat in these seats. So there you've got Lawrence Delalio, Ben Clark, Nick Easter. Oh, actually, Lawrence has sat in a few of these seats. His name's all over the place. He's been around. But yeah, I'm taking all the forwards sit in this section, not because the seats are wider, but because obviously forwards are listed here. And here you've got Steve Borthwick, Ben Kay, Martin Bayfield has sat in that seat. And then you sit down here and you look up, and it's got a bit of a, I suppose, a bit of a sports cafe vibe because there's luminous lighting. And then you look up and you see all the key words that we often hear mentioned in sports. So you've got respect, enjoyment, discipline, sportsmanship, teamwork, which is really nice, isn't it? It's very different to dressing rooms of yesteryear, one would imagine. And then you walk out of the dressing room, which is where obviously the Tigers will be walking out this Saturday. And then some more history on this wall. You've got players who have represented their country the most times, I've guessed. You've got Phil Vickery here with 73 caps. You've got Jason Leonard down there with 114 caps. And what you've also got here to see as well are trophies, titles, cups that England have won over the years. So you've got the Grand Slam there. And then here, obviously, taking centre stage is the World Cup in 2003. So some more history for the players as they walk out into the tunnel. And then you get to the tunnel. And this is new, I believe. It's Brandon. You've got Shauna Brown there. You've got Owen Farrell, a big sign saying together, greater. And then the players will wait here for a little bit with the mascots before eventually walking through these doors. And I guess for a player, not that I've ever represented my country or ever played actually in a stadium like this, I know you're surprised by that. But when you get to this point and you see like what's in front of you, it's pretty breathtaking. And I suppose for a player, I don't know what they'd be feeling, but excitement, nervousness. I guess we should be asking Lawrence what they feel, but it's pretty spectacular, isn't it? What have you? So I'm here with Jim Buttar, who's the head groundsman here at Twickenham. It looks beautiful, by the way, can I just say, but it always does, in fairness. 400 million blades of grass, I read that.
Whoa.
Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So we we have to grow from seed. So that's what we do. We literally strip the surface every summer and we start again, basically.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it's one of those. It's everybody thinks, well, why do you need to do that when it looks so good?
But a lot of the work that you do, like, it's done by hand, right? No sit on lawnmowers here at Twickenham?
No. We do a significant amount of walking. So
How far do you walk a day when you're treating
on
it?
average days, we're probably talking about 7-8 miles a day. So
I need to come and work here. My steps would be right up if I did that every day.
It just makes you eat more.
That I don't need. 7 miles a day.
Yeah. To be honest, you don't realise you've done it. So unless you've got a pedometer and you check, really you just don't treat it any differently. But I've been doing groundsmanship for 25 years. So
How many of you are on the team then here? How many of you
so there's 4 of us full time.
So in terms of like this Saturday, match day, how much work goes into preparing the field, the week of, say?
So it's probably hard to kind of put it into that sort of window. So we had the counties the weekend before last. The Monday after that is when I begin prep for this weekend. So it's all in the planning. So I will essentially try and plan out as far as possibly. So I'm already now, to a degree, everything's been planned for this for 6 months. I will maybe tweak and change, but for the best part of it, it's been for 6 months. So I am now already at renovations in August, and September, October is where I'm at in my head. So it goes to show you how far ahead we kind of plan. It's difficult, it changes. We're nurturing nature at the end of the day, and when Mother Nature decides not to play ball, we have to dance around that.
Now we have a love-hate relationship. Like, I love the way the pitch looks. You hate me walking on it. Now see, I don't get this. Every Prem final, what shoes has she got on? Don't wear heels. But then you've got 30 rugby players, 18-stone rugby players with togs on running all over at the same time. Explain to me.
I know. So it's all about the presentation. So for me, it's for the players. Okay. So that's what it's there for. And I don't know. I think I get very protective over the work, and it's not that I don't want people to enjoy it. I do want people to enjoy it, but it needs to be managed.
Yeah, when that much work goes into it.
It does, yeah. And obviously there's areas that get more intensive usage, and it's not necessarily due to the play. It's just obviously that nature of funneling down towards the tunnel and coming back out post-match. So you've got obviously the celebrations for lifting.
Champagne cannot be good for grass, or is it? I don't know.
No. It's definitely not good for the grass. But I mean, there's a lot of things we kind of have to take into account. I mean, the logos that have to go down. Obviously, painting grass isn't ideal, so we have to do that. Obviously, really quick turnaround. We've obviously got to try and put the paint on as late as possible and then remove it as quickly as possible.
How long does that take? How long does doing the lines take?
So in terms of me marking out the white lines, that's probably a 2-hour job.
Okay.
So I do take my time to make sure they're straight, obviously.
Yeah.
And they're in the right place.
Pretty tough, I'd say.
Yeah. But with regards to the logos, there's a team that come in and they'll spend probably 6-7 hours doing those logos that need to go down.
Okay. And finally, this weekend is going to be boiling, we are told.
Yes.
Does that make your job a little more difficult?
It does. So because the pitch is a sand construction, I have to kind of keep quite a uniform moisture level in it. I don't want it too wet because then that affects the play, so the players can slip over. We have issues with traction, which is what we don't want. We obviously want the guys to be able to perform. And what we'll tend to find is as it heats up over the day, that moisture's either we're losing it to evapotranspiration or it's slowly moving through the profile. Obviously, I can't water during the day, so I'll have to get that just right in the morning, as late as I possibly can do, before the match.
It's really interesting because I think there's so many layers to what you guys do that we just take for granted. We rock up here on match day, we see everything looking lovely, and we don't think about the hard work that actually goes into it, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think for me, that's when I know I've done a good job when nobody's talking about the pitch. Because
really? Like a referee?
Absolutely, yeah. I think if it's a bad pitch, it will just get spoken about. Everybody will see it, whereas nobody says anything. So
when does the final cut happen? Before Saturday?
So we will be kind of weather dependent. We're hoping to get on there first thing in the morning of the game. We have got community events, so we have got kids on there, which is great for rugby. I love it to a degree.
Not great for you.
But yeah, obviously we've still got a degree of fixing up to do once the kids are finished, ready for the final.
Yeah, and then afterwards then, because obviously you've got the Barbarians match on the Sunday. How soon after the final whistle goes do you start again?
So once everybody's disappeared down to the tunnel to commiserate or celebrate, me and my team will be back out here starting to work again, ready to turn it around, ready for England the following day.
It's relentless.
It is this time of year, yeah. It gets very condensed and squeezed, and we do have lots of fixtures to fulfil, but it keeps us busy.
Well, thank you so much. That was super interesting. Thank you for your time. Cannot wait to the weekend, guys. Can't wait for the final this Saturday. Lawrence, thanks for having me. Back to you.
Well, that's all from this episode of Lawrence Delalio's Rugby Podcast. My thanks to Sarra for taking us on that magnificent tour of Twickenham, and also to the legend that is Brad Barritt for sharing his memories of all those amazing Premiership finals. Sarra, myself and Brad will of course all be at the game on Saturday. It's going to be a cracker. Enjoy the final, and we'll see you soon.